Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a speculative fiction writer. Today we're going to be talking about how to write a query letter. I've tried to film this video, or I have filmed this video like 4 or 5 times at this point. I've always gone back and forth about whether or not sharing my letter will actually be helpful because, first of all, so much of querying is luck. It's a whack process. It's a whack industry. The way that I've decided that I'm going to do this video now is I'm going to take you through my letter. I'm going to take you through how to structure a query, but also I'm going to talk about my mistakes, also showing you how the current blurb of the book looks like after revision, after my agent's input. Doing this is a good balance between showing you, hey, this is the letter that I queried, but also this is how it could be improved. I apologize, I'm like so scatterbrained because truly, I don't know, something always goes wrong whenever I write the script, whenever I film the video. This video is probably going to be found by people like outside of my usual audience. So I'll just like give the quick rundown. So last year I queried an upmarket science fiction novel, and it's a retelling. It's a retelling of The Great Gatsby. I received 3 offers of representation after 6 weeks of querying. Can't exactly remember my full stats. I made a newsletter where I think that has my querying stats, so I'll put that down below. Of course, I am not a literary agent, so always, when it comes to writers sharing their individual experience, just keep in mind that it is an individual experience. I'm gonna put in the description box as well some frequently asked questions. So if you're totally new to querying, if you are totally new to traditional publishing, hopefully some of your introductory questions will be answered down below. 2 more quick disclaimers. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of like a speculative fiction, genre fiction writer. So like I said, what I queried is a science fiction novel. It is classified as upmarket sci-fi, but at the end of the day, it is a cyberpunk novel. I mention this because I think depending on what you're querying, there's like slightly different genre expectations. If you're writing literary fiction or contemporary fiction, I think a lot of what I will talk about in this video in terms of how to structure the letter is still applicable. Like, I think it's not wildly different. In case you haven't seen it, I will also recommend Shaylin's query letter video. It's a great query letter. It might be slightly more relevant and helpful to you. And finally, this video is going to be specifically for querying fiction. Process for pitching nonfiction is slightly different. So let's talk about the letter. Writing a strong query letter, it's essentially a scientific formula. If you follow the formula well, you will already be ahead of a lot of writers. I think a lot of the time writers like overcomplicate what they need to do to write a query letter, and I don't blame writers because it is a really difficult process. I will just say right up front, if you're wondering to yourself, do I need to have my letter professionally critiqued? Do I need to drop a lot of money on a query letter critique? You can write a strong query letter based on so many free resources. Hopefully this video will be a free resource. So querying is a formula. I'd say it's about 50% luck and 50% your hard work and the quality of your manuscript. Don't neglect the quality of your manuscript. Luck is the part of the querying process that you can't control, but how much you edit your book and how much you focus on making sure that your sample pages and your book is in a good place, that's the stuff that you can control. With that said, there are a lot of variables to consider with querying. How popular is the genre that you're writing in? How high concept is your pitch? So a high concept pitch it basically just means that the hook of your story can be summarized in 1 sentence. Another factor is also like the taste of the agent that you're querying, how passionate they are about the premise. Like if they're super passionate about the premise and they see potential in your writing, they might be willing to work with you on like an imperfect manuscript. Maybe they like your writing, but they're not that passionate about the premise. Like there's a lot of factors that go into an agent's decision. Another factor is if they already have something similar on their list. So if a client of theirs has already written or is writing a story that is super similar to yours, they might like your story, but priority is always going to be their clients. So yeah, I was querying a science fiction novel. Sci-fi is not a super popular genre. Not as many agents represent it. Not as many editors acquire it. But again, I got lucky. The stars align. It's not impossible. It's never hopeless. Don't self-reject. I almost did not query this book. I actually, when I was writing it, I didn't think I was going to query it because I didn't really want to go into the query trenches with a genre that is considered unmarketable. But if I had self-rejected, then wouldn't have gotten lucky. So you basically just never know what's going to happen. I also made some mistakes when I was querying, wrote a pitch, and we'll get into it. The biggest mistake that I made is that it was just a bit unfocused and vague. A lot of that came down to the fact that I didn't do as much editing on the manuscript as I could have developmentally and structurally. There were some things that I didn't do at first because I queried very quickly, wrote the first draft, and then 2.5 weeks later, I was like sending the first queries. So the book was beta read. I had beta readers on it while I was writing it, but my query letter wasn't beta read. You can tell because it just wasn't focused enough. But I did ultimately still receive 3 offers, and based on the calls that I had with these agents, I think that I received those offers, not because I wrote a stellar pitch, but because they liked my sample pages. And though I didn't write the pitch perfectly, they were still willing to work with me. And also, I think the second factor was that, again, the pitch is high concept. It's a speculative retelling. It's a queer retelling. The agent that I eventually did sign with, my current agent, another thing she said is that she felt like thematically the book was very relevant and timely. So those are the factors that went into her interest in the project. I'm going to show you guys my letter. But for the blurb part of the letter, like I mentioned before, I'm actually going to show you side by side what I queried, so the first draft of my blurb, versus how the blurb has been improved upon and edited over the last year. It reflects some of the changes that I made to the manuscript. I feel like this will be helpful to show because some of the language that is in this new current blurb comes directly from my agent. Okay, so the blurbs are like 90% the same, but there are some key sentences, some key factors to the improved blurb that I think make a big difference. It always starts with the salutation. You say, "Dear agent's name." I think the important part is that you address the agent by name. So paragraph 1 of a query letter is going to be the manuscript wishlist personalization. It's a good idea, if you can, to have at least one sentence that makes it clear to the agent that you read their manuscript wishlist, you did, at least 5 to 10 minutes of research on what this agent likes to represent, and you put that in your query letter. So what I wrote was, "I noticed you are interested in surprising high concept twists on classic stories and hope my work might be a fit." I'm specifically reading from the letter that I sent to the agent that I actually signed with. Her manuscript wish list, like the reason that she was one of my top agents was because I wrote literally a retelling, and she mentioned that she likes that kind of thing in her wish list. She said that she likes commercial stories with a literary voice. And I felt like that was a summary of what I like to write and what I hope to write in my career. And I think that's another important thing to think about when you're thinking about potential agents, is based on their wish list. Not only does this project seem like a good fit for this agent, but will my future projects seem like a good fit for this agent? Also, in the opening of your query letter, you want to share your metadata. So metadata is basically the information about your book. So you want to include stuff like word count, age demographic, and genre. You can put comparative titles as in the opening as part of your query letter as well. Personally, I put comps at the end of my letter. Just felt like I wanted to get into the blurb faster, but I've seen people who also put their comps at the start. Word count is important to an agent. They want to know, do you have an understanding of the market for the genre that you're writing in? Traditional publishing has like a lot of standards around these kinds of things. Like if you're only a little bit under or a little bit over, it's probably not a big deal. But for example, if you wrote like a 175,000 word like YA contemporary, that's extremely long. I'm seeking representation for my 105,000 word adult literary science fiction novel, Local Heavens, a cyberpunk reimagining of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, told from a queer BIPOC perspective. Let's get into the blurb. A blurb is essentially marketing copy. You can imagine this as going on the back of a book, entice a reader to pick up your book. And you'll notice that blurbs structurally are all the same almost, and it's usually split up into three main sections or three main paragraphs, and each section of the blurb has its own function. In paragraph 1 of a blurb, this is to establish the tone of your story, the setting, and the main character. You can think of this paragraph as explaining your book's once upon a time in a kingdom far, far away, there was a XYZ character who blah, 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 right? New York City 2075, the heart of the fractured new Americas, is a technological metropolis, shining towers of corporate royalty casting bleak shadows over the slums of a crumbling middle class. Nick Carraway, a Filipino-American raised in the suburban biodomes of Minnesota, is a modest contractor floating listlessly between corporate jobs. Trained as a highly specialized hacker, his prospects in the monotonous workforce have fallen short of his richer colleagues. So this opening is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. It does establish the cyberpunk tone of the book and of the setting, which is, futuristic New York. It's a Gatsby retelling, and technically it does introduce us to the character. But I think the way that it introduces us is a little bit lacking. The most important part of your blurb is usually going to be how you describe your character. You don't want to be vague about the details of your character's goals and motivations and personality. You want to ensure that your pitch starts with tension and sustains that tension, because tension is plot, it's intrigue, it's what keeps a reader wanting to know more. I'm going to show you what the opening paragraph of my current blurb is. New York 2075, list, all of that stays. Filipino-American Nick Carraway works as a modest corporate net diver, a hacker with the ability to project his consciousness into cyberspace, who finds his life inexplicably uprooted when he's assigned to lead a covert investigation into the America's most elusive billionaire, the president of a burgeoning new money empire, Jay Gatsby, whose meteoric success is as exceptional as it is dubious. So looking at these two side by side, the second version says a lot more about the characters. It says a lot more about the action that the protagonist has to take in this at the start of the story, and it has more specificity around his motivation and his goals. I think the biggest difference, draft 1, it sounds like the plot is happening to the character, whereas in the current version, it's clear how the plot is being dictated by the character. And character agency is something that is extremely important in genre fiction, because that's what fits Western storytelling structures. And so an agent is really going to be looking for that. Paragraph 2 of your blurb has to establish the inciting incident and building upon the conflict. Paragraph 1 is about saying, once upon a time, there was blah, blah, blah. Then paragraph 2 is about transitioning into, but then one day this thing happens and it shakes up the main character's life. It shakes up the main character's goal. When he unexpectedly receives a lucrative opportunity to work at the prestigious Gatsby Corporation, Nick is swept up into the hedonistic luxury of New York's upper class, full of champagne parties, metal bodies cheating death, and mind-bending psychedelics straddling the line between virtual and real. Soon he unknowingly crosses paths with the America's most elusive billionaire, none other than the president of Gatsby Corp himself, Jay Gatsby. He's alluring, richer than God, and a charming new money socialite. But when Nick meets the mysterious Jordan Baker, a dazzling athlete who enlists Nick's help to investigate Gatsby's past, Nick quickly starts to question who the man truly is and what sinister reasons he's hiding for befriending Nick in the first place. All right, lots to talk about here. So you'll notice that it takes half the letter to bring up Gatsby. In the current blurb, we mentioned Gatsby right away in paragraph 1. Again, this second paragraph is doing what it's supposed to do. It's just wordy. It takes a bit too long to resolve. What it resolves toward is not specific enough. So language like the sinister reasons he's hiding for befriending Nick in the first place, this doesn't have as much emotional impact, because the words like sinister reasons, they don't give us an indication of why these secrets are such a big deal. The current blurb reads, plunged into the hedonistic luxury of New York's upper class, it's a world Nick can barely imagine, swirling with decadent parties, tech-enhanced bodies cheating death, and mind-bending psychedelics, blurring the line between virtual and real. But as Nick's investigation deepens, he falls into an improbable friendship with Gatsby, whose enchanting yet unsettling allure begins to reveal deeper questions about his identity, how far he will go to rewrite his past, and how Nick's own simmering attraction might make him complicit in the darker side to Gatsby's accomplishments and his obsessions. It's the last line that ties the whole paragraph together because, unlike in the first version, it brings the conflict back to the main character. So it's not just saying like, hey, these are the crazy things that start happening in the book. It's saying these are the crazy things that start happening, and this is why it matters. This is why it'll be disastrous for our protagonist specifically. Current version of the blurb, I think, does a better job of hinting at how Local Heavens as a project is different from the original. It takes place in a cyberpunk dystopia, and B, it explores Nick and Gatsby specifically through a queer lens, fundamentally changes the story and complicates all of the relationships in the book. The last paragraph of the blurb, this paragraph should highlight the stakes of your book. So what does a character stand to lose if they do not achieve their goal? Or what is the trade-off of them achieving their goal? Like, what gets sacrificed? What are the consequences? What are the difficult choices that they potentially have to make? Stakes are all about making a reader want to know what happens next and how is this character possibly going to get out of this situation. You want to entice an agent far enough to continue reading on to your sample pages. Searching for answers, Nick becomes entangled in a web of shocking secrets until he's caught between the catastrophic sins of the ultra-wealthy and the devastating consequences of their actions on the city's most oppressed people. Pushed to the brink, he is forced to confront a dangerous truth. In a world of broken power systems that serve the rich above all else, how much humanity do you sacrifice in exchange for privilege? It's mostly fine. The current blurb reads, crossing paths with the quick-witted Jordan Baker, a star athlete with her own strange connections to Gatsby, Nick becomes entangled in the intricate affairs of the powerful elite and forced to confront the dangerous consequences of the broken systems that serve the rich above all else. So the current paragraph is a little shorter, and the shorter the better. Being concise and as clear as possible is really the goal with your pitch, because you have to remember a lot of agents are skimming. They have to pick out the heart of your pitch very quickly. Like they're reading probably hundreds of queries in a week. Fourth paragraph that you can include is you can speak to your book's themes. Don't get too carried away talking about your themes. I've seen some people try to put themes at the start of their query. Might be okay, but I think that agents mostly want to get to your pitch as fast as possible. You have to remember that themes without context are actually quite vague, and they aren't as interesting for an agent compared to getting to know your world and your characters. Like, that's what is going to matter more to an agent. Make sure that you're specific. The way I wrote it is that I combined my thematic notes with my comparative titles. I wrote, the novel seeks to interrogate the Great Gatsby's themes of wealth disparity, obsession, and greed through the lens of late-stage capitalism and technology. It may appeal to those who enjoy the genre-blending atmosphere and intimate voice of This Is How You Lose the Time War, or the Black Mirror-esque examination of the haunting wonders of scientific progress. I actually changed my comps depending on the agent I was querying. I didn't always comp to Time War or Black Mirror. The important thing with comps is that you should always be comping to at least one book, preferably 2 books, maybe 3 books. But you want to make sure that you're comping to at least one book, one that is well known. You can comp to other media, just again, as long as that other media is well known. The point of comps is to tell an agent, hey, I know roughly how this can be positioned in the market, and this is potentially types of readers that will also be interested. My agent would also comp this book to Station 11, so like literary, speculative literary, other stuff. What are the other things that I comped to? I can't remember. I do talk about themes in the blurb, but I don't focus the pitch on the themes, which I hear from agents is something that can be a little detrimental for your blurb because it adds to your word count. The last paragraph of your query should be your biography. Keep it short and simple. If you have like relevant experience, you can add that. So for example, let's say you're writing a book that incorporates art history or something. You are an art history major. That's a good thing to add. Writing, if this is your first book, if you don't have any writing credentials, it's totally fine. Give a little bit of background about whatever your job is, whatever you're studying, but mostly this is like not a part of your query that is going to make or break anything to an agent. What I wrote was myself. I'm a Filipino-Canadian speculative fiction writer based in Toronto. I have a bachelor's degree in global business and digital arts from the University of Waterloo and work in tech as a digital designer. My cyberpunk short fiction is forthcoming in Augur magazine. Thanks very much for your time and consideration. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that this breakdown is helpful. If you have any more questions about querying, let me know. If you want to support me and this channel and my work, I have a Ko-fi page where you can support the channel through one-time donations, or you can join my monthly memberships. Every month, I open up a couple beta reading slots. Hopefully this video on its own is helpful. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting Local Heavens. If you want to know more about Local Heavens, make sure you follow me here on my other socials, or if you want to be like first to be in on the loop on any announcements, any updates, you can subscribe for free to my newsletter on Substack. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope all your writing projects are going well, and I'll see you guys in the next one.